I've been a metalhead for most of my life. Some of my favorite bands include Trivium, Lamb of God, Dream Theater, Megadeth, Avenged Sevenfold, Tool, but anytime I have to wonder what my favorite band is, I always go back to Metallica. I wouldn't be able to say exactly what it is that attracts me so much to them. Maybe it's their incredible riffs or their great, consistently serious lyrics. Or maybe it's their presence. Maybe it's their incredible production. Or just the personalities of these people that I have grown to know and love as idols. But one way or another, Metallica is my favorite band of all time. And with the release of their 10th album a couple of years ago, I have finally enough entries to make a top 10. So here is my top 10 Metallica albums of all time. Now without further ado, let's just start this list with the most predictable entry in this entire video. This album is a piece of garbage. Seriously, how bad can the best metal band in the whole world get? There are a couple of good things in this album, and there are a couple of good things that came from the production of this album, particularly the introduction of new bassist Rob Trujillo and the band realizing that they suck at nu metal. But everything else pretty much blows. The guitar tone is muddy and sounds really cheap. It feels vocals went to some strange places, and Lars's drums sound like a literal trash can. I would say the best song in this album is the title track, and Frantic is pretty decent, but everything else is just so bad. To the band's credit, they were going through a very difficult time in their lives. Hetfield left for rehab, and Lars went through a very serious phase of douchebaggery. And Hammett was just there, as usual. They had no bassist, their producer sucked, and they wanted to be trendy. Good thing they stopped. While their 1991 Black Album was amazing, it was undeniably a step forward into radio-friendly territory, but still not purely commercial hard rock. Load was undoubtedly where Metallica first started to embrace their radio personality and compose non-metal pieces all over the album. Most of the songs in this album are pretty mediocre, although there are some notable exceptions, thankfully. I think Ain't My Bitch is pretty badass. And Hero of the Day is decent. But most of the album is plagued by atrocities like Mama Said, which is country. Wild blood in my veins, apron the strings around my neck. Or the infinitely overrated King Nothing, which I think is just okay. Also, quick comment, Metallica changed their logo starting with this album, and it's hideously disgusting. I'm glad they went back to the original logo after some time. Controversy among fans arose when Metallica released what felt like the other half of this album a year and a half later, which contained better songs and far better artwork. Nevertheless, it still wasn't a worthy addition to their catalog, though a big step forward in quality. Unsurprisingly, that album's called Give Me Fuel, Give Me Fire, Give Me That Which I Desire. sharper sound and better riffs all over. Reload counts with 1,000,000 times more iconic songs than Load, which shows in Metallica's setlist during the past decade. Songs like Fuel or The Memory Remains are pretty good and are still staple in Metallica's live set after all these years. The video for Memory Remains is really cool too. I'm still glad they decided to go back to metal after these records. Even if the result was the awful 2003 album that I described before, it's still closer to what they used to do back in the day, and what they returned to after some terrible years. The one that started it all. The record that kickstarted Metallica's career and is still affecting their sound and fanbase to this day, more than 30 years later. Fresh with Dave Mustaine's riffs and solos and Cliff Burton's brilliant bass and the band's contagious energy. Even though I like this album, I feel some people give it too much credit for just being the first one. It's an important album, obviously, but I don't think it's that great. To me, every song feels slightly more repetitive as you progress through the album, and their production is obviously not the best, seeing that the band was starving poor. Still, I think this is a good album, and that with the band's modern production and musicianship, it sounds even better live.
Give it to me!
I thought about this a lot, but I have to conclude that this is definitely not Metallica's best work in years. I wrote a formal review of this album when it came out, so I'm going to leave the link below for you to read. But basically, I think the production is amazing, the best production they've ever had. But the songs, half of them at least, are not great. I don't think there's a single bad song in this album. I just don't think all of them are great. Some standouts, obviously Moth into Flame, I think it's a great. The title track is great. Spit Out the Bone is one of the best in their whole history. But half of this album, I feel, feels like filler. I would like to bring attention to one of their bonus tracks, Lords of Summer. I find it extremely sad that Lords of Summer is just a bonus track on some records, because I think it's one of the best songs in this album, and it's not even in some versions of it. If they re-edited this album without the filler songs and adding Lords of Summer, this would easily be number 4.
Pound it, no remorse. Lords of Summer, sit on course. Push it, horsemen ride. Lords of Summer. Landmine, that's digging my sight, digging my speech, digging my hair, digging my arms, digging my legs, digging my soul. Everyone life in here.
I've always had very mixed feelings about this album, and they haven't changed too much over the years. Although this album isn't bad at all, there are several very questionable production choices. Famously, the almost complete lack of bass is a big one. This was Jason Newsted's first album after Cliff Burton's death, and he sadly had the worst introduction imaginable, getting credit for only one song and no trace of his playing anywhere. Nevertheless, the reason why this album holds such a high spot on this list is because the good songs are amazing, and the unmemorable songs are just that, unmemorable. Two of my all-time favorite songs are on this album, the title track and the famous One, which has always been my favorite from their entire repertoire. This is also the album that cemented Lars Ulrich as one of the greatest drummers of all time, even if he never lived up to his chops again. To Live Is To Die, Eye of the Beholder, and The Frayed Ends of Sanity I would held as the mediocre part of this album, which is the main reason why it doesn't sit higher on this list. Nevertheless, any other song on this album is great, and it really shows in the band's set over the years. I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, but I think this album is excellent. It didn't only bring back Metallica from the ashes of Saint Anger and finally introduced Trujillo's talents to the studio, but it also brought Metallica back to its roots of thrash metal. This album is heavy and fast, and I love it. I only have two problems with it. First, it's its infamous production, which awarded the band the Guinness World Record for loudest album in history. I'm serious, look it up. Second, two of the most promising songs end up being plain terrible in an otherwise excellent album. The Unforgiven 3 is one of the worst ballads the band has ever written, and Suicide and Redemption may be the most boring instrumental, even worse than To Live Is To Die. And yeah, half of Hammett's solos suck. But ignoring those aspects, which sound like a lot but really are not, this album has some amazing tunes. The rest of the album, like That Was Just Your Life or my personal favorite, All Night Long, are incredible pieces of music. I really hope the band realizes they're feeding the hate for this album by not playing any of its songs live, and I hope that when I see them in the future, they fix this.
Shine, doing what I've shown. Never be, never see.
This top 3 spots are easily the most difficult to place because all of the 3 albums remaining are absolutely incredible. So, you're the biggest metal band in the world, even bigger than your greatest inspiration, Black Sabbath, and you have to step up your game from your Grammy-winning album in 1988. What do? These guys decided to hire a producer for commercial bands like Bon Jovi and Motley Crue and see how it went on the studio. This guy, Bob Rock, rejected Hetfield's lyrics and challenged the band to evolve their sound. It should have been horrible, but the results were amazing. Metallica's self-titled album, also referred to as the Black Album, is almost perfect in every single way. The production is top-notch, the musicality and lyrics are some of the best, and even though it's not as fast or complicated as their previous albums, this album is an amazing listen from beginning to end. If I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be Sad But True. Yes, I know, sue me. It may not seem like it, but I'm really trying to be objective. That's why I have to place this at number 2, because this is my favorite Metallica album, but I know it's not the best. Nevertheless, this album kicks some serious ass. The tone, the mix, the lyrics, the energy, and the originality are just top of the game. Lightning is my favorite Metallica album because it does everything right. And Metallica doing something right means them doing something awesome. Every single song is great. Creeping Death, For Whom the Bell Tolls, The Call of Cthulhu, everything is amazing in this album. Cliff Burton was at the top of his game and brought life to the band that we hadn't seen before and would only be surpassed in the following record. But what makes this album my favorite is its great and memorable songs, which are all staples in the band's setlist and are synonymous with their legendary status. Well, duh. This is considered by most to be Metallica's best album, and the reason why I have to agree is because it's the only one of all of these albums to not have a single bad or dull or filler song. Each one of the 10 songs in this album is iconic, representing the masterpiece that Master of Puppets is usually seen as. From the first acoustic chords in Battery to the blasting riffs in Damage Inc., this album never rests, never has a single dull moment, and features Cliff Burton's best work ever. As the last album he recorded before dying in that bus crash, this is more than a proper send-off to the greatest bassist the band ever had. This album took everything Ride the Lightning did right and improved upon it, and anything it did wrong, it made it good. If there's one Metallica album that you should keep in your car, Master of Puppets is the best option, because any song in it can easily brighten your day. Also, hands down, best cover art of any other Metallica album.
You will do what I say when I say you will die when I say you must die. You coward, you servant, you puppet. Walking over machine gun fire.
So, what do you think? Are you one of those hipsters who think Insane Anger is the best work Metallica has ever done? If you are, feel free to not tell me so. If anything else, go ahead. Peace and rock on. And if you want more, click here.
So boy,